This video might ruffle some feathers. After replaying the AC series recently, realising some aren't so bad, and seriously questioning how in the sweet Jesus, Mary and Joseph some even got made, I've put together my definitive list of the 4 worst Assassin's Creed games that I personally dislike the most, along with some dishonourable mentions. Starting off from least bad to outright painful, we've got Valhalla. And as much as I love the Viking setting, the amazing visuals, and the genuinely fun open world, this game has some issues. Combat is satisfying at times, and I do think it's the best out of the trio of RPG games, but I am not a fan of these over-the-top animations. They look so out of place and take me out of the experience, especially in a Viking setting. It doesn't really look right and makes me question what AC has become. Animations are another issue. They're clunky, stiff, and nowhere near as smooth as what we had in games a decade ago. It's not terrible, but it's just frustratingly average. Now, at least this one does try to bring back the assassin themes, unlike other installments, and I almost feel like shedding a tear as Ubisoft actually added the Hidden Blade, aside from the fact it's not hidden and it might as well be called the Visible Blade, but that is the least of its problems. Parkour feels phoned in, and it's piss basic as it comes. It's so underwhelming with its basic animations, minimal control, and pretty much no flow, and the same goes for the stealth. It's technically there, but it's so watered down it's not even really worth using, and you'll get more results just running in Loud and Larry. But worse of all, it's a game that can take over 60 hours to beat, and it very quickly becomes a drag. It starts off quite strong, but it's hard to stay emotionally invested when the pacing is so damn slow, and it literally feels like Ubisoft gives zero dicks about respecting your time as you play through it. For me, Valhalla isn't the worst AC game. Unlike others, at least this one attempts to be somewhat AC related, but sadly I would have enjoyed it much more as its own Viking RPG. But thankfully this was the game to finally kick Ubisoft up the arse, pushing them to return to its roots, which means surely things can only get better. Well, not really. Next up, it's Assassin's Creed Mirage, the game that was hyped beyond belief as a return to its roots, and I've heard that about 89 times, and on paper that sounds amazing, and it is something I've personally wanted, except it forgot what made those roots so good in the first place. If I had never played the series before and you asked me which game came out first, Unity or Mirage, I'd honestly say Mirage. Unity felt like an evolution of the old formula, whereas this seems to somehow go backwards, despite how visually amazing it may look on the surface. Parkour at launch played like a shit in your pants simulator with how slow and sluggish it felt. It has since been sped up, but even now, it's nowhere near as fluid as games that came out nearly a decade ago, and I found that majorly disappointing, as parkour is literally the roots of AC. Yes, it's cool using the Hidden Blade again properly, but the same repetitive takedown animations become boring as hell to watch, and I really miss fist fighting and using the Hidden Blade at will, which still doesn't exist here. Combat is a shell of its former self, and it feels incredibly clunky. Those of you like me who played the classics will recognise the shoddiness immediately, and the animations just look so underwhelming when compared to the older ones, but at least it does feel somewhat satisfying at times. Despite these flaws, I could have looked past them, as at least this one actually feels like it should have AC in the title. But Christ, the story. I do not like Basim as a main character at all. In Valhalla, he was somewhat layered, but here he feels like a pound shop Ezio with half the personality. His entire arc feels like Ubisoft just wanted to cash in on nostalgia without doing any of the work to make us care. And I found him one of the most boring protagonists to date. And to top it off, Mirage has one of the worst and most questionable endings, because it will not make any sense to fans of the classics that would have likely have skipped the RPG style games. Yet, this was the exact market Ubisoft were targeting. Makes a lot of sense, to be fair. 1 minute Mirage acts like it's flipping off the RPG timeline, but suddenly ties directly into it. Who thought this was a good idea, for Pete's sakes? Mirage isn't the worst game in the series, but it fell massively short with its promise to bring back the glory days. In more ways than others, it feels like a regression. But if you thought Mirage was a letdown, these final 2 picks are where I think the series truly got it wrong. If you're enjoying this video so far, hit that subscribe button, because over 90% of you aren't subscribed. It's free, helps the channel, and I'd personally love for you to stick around and join the 5%. Next up, it's a game filled with so much content, you'll feel like you've aged about 5 years after finishing it. Yes, it's Odyssey. Now look, I do get why people enjoy this game. Ancient Greece is absolutely stunning, and yes, I did have fun with it at times. But like Valhalla, this one suffers from an even worse identity crisis, and it's even further removed from what Assassin's Creed is supposed to be. No hidden blade, no brotherhood, no real stealth. You're wielding a spear while Sparta kicking gobshites off a cliff, for Christ's sake. Combat isn't awful, but it leans so far into RPG territory and gear instead of it feeling skill-based. As enemies become hard as hell to kill, you are forced into constant grinding, thanks to the gameplay loop of level-gated progression, which becomes very tedious. Some people might enjoy the grind, but I personally don't. And I hate spending countless hours in pause menus, switching out gear so frequently, as you will constantly come across better items throughout the game, and I wonder how long we actually end up spending in these pause menus. Still not as much as Starfield, and as much as I like Odyssey's open world, for me, I always prefer quality over quantity. Yes, it's huge, but it's packed with filler content, and I found it very overwhelming at times, and I think the focus could have been spent better elsewhere. What I've never understood with the story is why they didn't use the first DLC, which features Darius and the Hidden Blade, as a part of the main story instead. We could have had something that actually related to the Creed, with the addition of the Hidden Blade, but they pushed it off to the side as bonus content, and it just feels like a missed opportunity. Instead, we got a story that tries to be emotional, but the characters feel robotic, probably because the game barely used motion capture, and an ending that felt massively underwhelming after 60 plus hours of build-up, making the whole thing feel not worthwhile. In the end, it honestly feels like Ubisoft had a cool idea for a Greek RPG and lazily put the Assassin's Creed name on it to sell more copies. Yes, it's stunning, it's ambitious, and as a standalone RPG, I do like it, but as an Assassin's Creed game, I really don't. However, despite Odyssey's flaws, it still doesn't come close to the lows of my number one pick. But before I reveal the game I dislike most in the series, the following dishonorable mentions might not be bad enough to add to the list, but they are still certainly worth mentioning. Origins. Easily my favourite game of the RPG trilogy, and genuinely enjoyable at times. But let's be honest here, this was the first big step away from the original Assassin's Creed formula, and it might have been fun at times, but it was also the catalyst for how deformed the series would become over the next few years. Assassin's Creed 3. There is a lot I like about it, and it was before the franchise was milked pissless, but to be brutally honest, the pacing of the story is horrendous, and the ending feels rushed. Until this day, I still think killing Desmond was a massive mistake and really badly done. And for me, the modern day storylines have never even come close to what they once were. Assassin's Creed Chronicles. This is easily forgotten, and many probably don't even know it existed. Because it's a 2.5D platformer and was cheap as dog at the time, it often gets a pass. But China was the only one I actually enjoyed, and the art style was kind of cool, but I personally never want to see anything like this again. But my number one pick is a different breed altogether. It had major potential, one heck of a unique angle, but somehow Ubisoft completely fumbled the execution and has become so underrated over the years that it's now become overrated, and that is Assassin's Creed Rogue. Now, what a lot of videos won't tell you is Rogue was actually made in just 8 months. The studio behind it had less than a year to develop a full mainline Assassin's Creed game, just because Ubisoft needed something to release for last-gen consoles while Unity was launching on the new ones. Ubisoft wanted to give old-gen peasants something to feed on, but more importantly, they wanted their money. Where Unity got the trailers, the hype, the dev support, the old-gen tramps would be subject to a quiet announcement of Rogue just 3 months before release. And let's be honest, that is one horrendous foundation to build a game from, and the chances of it being good are lower than a beat to shit doorstop. Gameplay wise, to a lot of players' disappointment, it was a literal reskin of Black Flag. Same ship combat, same mechanics, a bit of icy water, and the same bitch slaps. And sure, they did add a few new things like sleep grenades, berserk bombs, and one cool enemy type, the hidden assassin stalkers, but overall, it was a clear copy and paste, and the gameplay feels identical to Black Flag, which in some ways is good, but also incredibly lazy. Instead of delaying development to give more time, making it feel worthy of its own release, Ubisoft felt it was alright to release as is. But what's even more disappointing is Rogue has one of the most interesting setups in the entire franchise. You play as a bloody Templar, but his motivations feel rushed and undeveloped. His turn from assassin to Templar should have been an emotional defining moment, but it's handled so quickly you never buy into it. And they had something special here, but didn't have the time to give the story room to grow, and because of this, it feels so wasted. At the very least, Rogue does feel like an AC game, but it's the one I dislike most for one big reason, and that's wasted potential. If Ubisoft had given it time, budget, and belief, Rogue could have been really amazing, with a fully fleshed out Templar perspective, but instead it was released the same day as Unity, priced the same, looked worse, and a reskin of Black Flag, and it deserves all the criticism for that reason. Otherwise, developers will start taking more shortcuts whilst asking for the same price tag, and as much as I'm not a fan of the RPG style games, a lot of time, effort, and thought was spent developing them, and never felt like an outright cash grab reskin. But unfortunately, the same can't be said for Rogue, as it truly feels like the most forgettable and biggest waste of potential in the entire series. Let me know in the comments the game you dislike most, I would be interested to know, as it does seem to vary a lot in the AC franchise. And to see my ranking of the best AC games of the series, make sure to click the card on screen, you don't want to miss that video. Thank you guys for watching as always, and I'll see you next time.